opportunity to get into their lessons at an affordable rate in a way that's going to help you, help the podcast, and get you playing more guitar. I'm excited to say that you can use the code 40WATT, 40WATT, at checkout to get 40% off your first or next purchase through TrueFire. That includes their all access pass to have access to all of their lessons and videos and jams. I highly recommend it. I use it myself. I'm a huge fan. I truly believe in TrueFire's motto of live, practice, and play. Please use the link below to get started, and happy learning. This episode is brought to you by my Patreon supporters. There's a wonderful crew of people over on Patreon giving money every month to make sure that this show and this podcast happen and cut my overhead costs so that I can keep doing it. I can't express my thanks enough for their support and their belief in what we're doing over here. And if you'd like to join them and help support this podcast, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast. For as little as $3 a month, you can support this show. And actually, now that we are starting to get sponsors for the episode, my $3 supporters will get the episodes ad-free. If you want to support at a $5 level, you'll get ad-free episodes and you will get additional content every week. I thank all of you that have given money to help keep this going, and I thank all of you that are going to become supporters and help make sure this show keeps happening. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 40 Watt Podcast. Thank you for joining me this week. I'm super excited about this episode. You've already listened to all the advertising spiels at the top of the episode, though I put that there. I don't have to tell you all that now. So instead, I'm going to introduce you to our guest. And as per my normal, I am not going to try to pronounce someone's last name because I know better. But I'm going to welcome Barry from Grez Guitars. Barry, how you doing?
All right. Awesome. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, I pretty much just go by Barry from Grez Guitars. It's just easier.
It is. It's there are a few consonants there in your name that I'm not used to pronouncing together like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
No, so I reached out to you because I've been we were just talking about gear acquisition syndrome, and we'll circle back around to that here in a minute. But one of those that has been staring me in the face is one of your Mendocinos, because I've been not looking for a baritone. You know how that is, and
I do. Well, I appreciate the consideration.
Yeah, looking but not looking. But yeah, I keep staring back at those, and of course, Blake over at the Tone Mob won't shut up. It's like you don't have Blake, you don't have to sell me more. Seriously. But so really happy to have you on the episode. So we're gonna do. I'm sure by now you've been on the Tone Mob. I haven't gone back through Blake's very vast array of back episodes to see everybody that's been on there.
Yeah, once a long time ago.
Yeah. So let's do what Blake does, and I'm going to what we call the 30,000 foot view. How'd you get into guitars? How'd that translate into guitar making? And how'd you get to where you are?
Yeah. Trying to think how to summarize 52 years of stuff. So tinkerer, guy who could fix things, took things apart as a kid, fixed my own motorcycles and bicycles. So always been more of a mechanically minded person.
Okay.
Got into electronics late in high school. So I really started out and guitar, but never seriously with guitar, right? Just terrible guitar player, just the way it goes. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy it, right? Obviously, here we are.
Right.
But
there's no skill requirement on enjoying anything in life. Yep. Y'all remember that.
Yeah. I feel like I'm a reasonably self-aware person, and it was very obvious to me, even in high school, that I would never earn any money playing guitar. So I might enjoy it, but that's fine. That was as far as it was going to go. So, but electronics piqued my interest seriously because it started to explain things, right? Just, record players and stereos and guitar amps and pedals and just what's inside of guitar. What are these knobs and what do they do? And that quick little introduction to electronics course I took, just sort of light bulbs started going off. Like, wow, that's what that is. That's how this works. This is amazing. So I started out eventually becoming an electronics designer. And I made a living for a long time designing audio products, equalizers, signal processors, eventually loudspeakers. Kind of had a whole separate career in the audio industry outside of guitars.
Yeah.
And
Which is a whole other world.
it's a different thing.
Actually,
And my
actually,
corner of it.
I want to caveat here and give an idea, just because, and we're going to try to remember where we are. So I went to school for music and audio engineering. It's not a double major; it was an interdisciplinary degree. I did most of my classes in music.
Okay.
I liked audio engineering. I was actually working as an audio engineer before I went back to college. Really, it was just a route to get me out of college because my degree program didn't have a path for guitar. So it was a way for me to get a music degree without a real path for a BA in music. So neither
Right.
here nor there. Never explained that before. I'm sure someone will ask me about it. But my instructor in audio engineering, he worked front of house for Aretha Franklin for years. And he got into the music industry. He was a keys player, organist, but he got in as an electrical engineer. And let me tell you, there were times, because I was working as an audio engineer before I came to the program, so he'd start talking about things in class and look at me like I'm supposed to know what he's talking about. He's like, yeah, like an 1176 and a 1073 and an API and a Neve, and like starts throwing out things at the time that I knew nothing of. And I'm like, Mike, I run sound in a blues club on a 35-year-old PV mixer.
It doesn't even have
What?
faders; it has knobs.
Right, exactly. The first one did. It just had knobs. It was like,
Yeah.
so yeah. And so when you say you came at it from an electronics background, that feels like a just before my age and generation. That seemed to be a common path into music gear. Like I see
Yeah.
it more and more in those. I think you're just a touch older than me, and it's like in that age. It seemed very common to approach it from like an electronics engineering or hey, I used to rebuild radios, and so I started playing guitar through one, and then I decided to make amps.
Yeah. Well,
It's like,
the interesting thing that probably people of my age had the opportunity to do, which is slightly different than you, even though you're not that much younger. When I came into the industry, let's say that the industry changed in the 60s and 70s. You get the Grateful Dead wall of sound. The kinds of loudspeakers that were being used for big PAs were changing, right? It was no longer just like uh, you know column speakers. They were becoming what looks a little bit
right,
more like modern sound systems. So the people who are on the forefront of designing all that stuff, the Dead wall of sound, all of those sort of innovations, when I came in, they were still in the middle to the late part of their careers. So I worked
gotcha,
with all those people. They were my bosses and my mentors. So I got to learn from guys who, were there when, the Beatles played Candlestick. They were doing sound. And, they used,
ah,
fixing Jimi Hendrix's guitar amps just because, they were the local sound company when he was coming through town. And he would blow up amps a lot, apparently. And
so
so there was
surprising
just,
no one.
right. So there was this group of really sort of brilliant folks that came out of the San Francisco Bay Area, really, that I was fortunate enough to work for, kind of apprentice under. It was, it was a job. They were my bosses, but it was really an
Yeah,
apprenticeship program to get to hang out with these folks. Um, and they're all retired and kind of gone now,
yeah,
but it was sort of an interesting moment in time where people from all walks of life were coming into the audio industry to create cool stuff. Because in the 70s, you didn't go to school to learn how to design an audio compressor,
right,
right? Or a giant stadium sound system. These were all people who these topics were their hobbies that they ended up taking very seriously. Like at one point, my one of the guys I worked for was a nuclear physicist. He worked on the propulsion system for the Enterprise, but his
what?
passion was audio, and he was designing these crazy cutting edge audio pieces of equipment. And this was the guy that I sat next to and worked with, right?
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
there's people from all these different places and all of these different backgrounds, but all with a common love of audio. And that's, I don't know, that was just like a weird moment in time where audio was changing. And
Yeah,
yeah, I was lucky enough to be on the coattails of that and hang out with these
yeah,
people.
that's so cool, and it's such a great angle to come at it from that I sort of wish was a little more common. Doing this podcast and talking to builders, and I talk to a lot of the pedal guys who are like, oh, well, I bought a kit and the kit taught me how to build a pedal. And from there, I started tinkering with pedals. Then I learned a little
Right.
more. Then you get someone like Mike Trombley from Native Audio who's like, no, I'm an electronic engineer. And like,
Right.
that's how he got into it, Um, it's, it's, it's such an interesting way to see the angles at which people come into the music industry. And I always feel a little intimidated when someone comes in and says it's like I'm back in class with Mike and he's like, I'm an electronics engineer, and it's like, I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna feel like an idiot.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway,
there's so
I,
much to know and so many topics and so much to forget. I haven't really done a lot of audio circuit design in a long time. That's just sort of
mhm,
something from my past. And every once in a while
sure.
I need to, and it's weird how much I've forgotten. Like I'll sit down to do something and like I don't remember the formula to calculate this thing that I used to do every day.
Oh yeah.
Shoot. But but that leads, one thing leads to the next. So electronics design, speaker design, eventually just being an acoustical consultant, um, and I sort of missed product design though, something I really enjoy. So I was working
Oh,
as an acoustical consultant for a long time, just designing the insides of places of worship, basketball arenas, school auditoriums, whatever, recording studios, and that's all fine and fun. But I wasn't really designing products for a while, and I kind of missed it, and somehow ended up realizing that with a background in acoustics and audio and product design and industrial design is just part of being a good product designer, um, I could probably design and build a guitar.
yeah.
So I and I was always a hobbyist woodworker. I had a table saw and a router and would make an end table or whatever. So I had some wood tools hanging around and some basic skills, and so I just decided to build a guitar.
That's
And now
that's awesome.
it's 13 years later or something like that, and it's flip-flopped. It started out I was mostly a consultant. That was my day job, and I would build guitars, and sell a guitar here and there. And now I'm mostly a guitar builder and do a little consulting on the side. It's kind of flipped, but that's all right.
Yeah, it's so cool, and the guitars you're building are super super cool. I need to pull up the list because I did earlier today pull up all the models, but it's been a long day, and so my brain is completely fried, and everything that I put in it earlier today is left. It's just gone. Um, but so you got it's not like a massive range, obviously, and that's the way I think a lot of the good small builders, and I try to soften the word small builder because I feel like I'm being derogatory and I'm
Right,
not.
it's not necessarily an insult, no.
Right, exactly. Um, that one of the things that happens that's so great is that you sort of get to hone in on these are what I do. Like I don't have to make something for everybody. I get to
Right.
make these couple of things and I get to make them great. Uh, so you've got obviously the various. We were talking just a little bit ago about the Mendocino. I need a baritone in my life. I had a baritone last year, and I made a financial decision last year. I bought a baritone, one of the Dan Electro, the sparkle black
Oh yeah, yeah.
baritones, and then Phoebe Bridgers smashed hers on SNL, and the price on them skyrocketed. And I made
Oh,
a financial decision. I'm gonna sell this right
the
now.
timing was good, yeah.
Yeah, I'll come back to this. So I made a little money, and now I'm baritoneless, and need to go back to that as well. But you also make the Folsom, which is like this super cool single cutaway. The version I likes with the Bigsby. Y'all keep coming at me with torches and pitchforks. Everybody gets mad at me because I love Bigsby's. I like them.
I do too.
They can
And
work.
they're fine.
They're fine, exactly. If you can't keep a Bigsby in tune, that's a you problem.
Yep.
That's not a Bigsby problem. So anyway, and now that I've alienated over half of my listener base, um, so you get into building guitars, and how fast was the progress into realizing that I can do this like full time?
I would say I went at this um, very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't just when I decided I was going to build a guitar, I didn't jump up and down and say, "Look at me, I'm a guitar builder. Aren't I awesome? Come buy from me." Right?
Right.
It was like a kind of a personal journey of studying and learning and understanding, and then building some more. And I had probably built 3 or 4 guitars at least before I really even told anybody I was making guitars.
Really?
Yeah, because my thing is, when you build that first guitar, it's a really great personal accomplishment.
Yeah.
But the world couldn't care less. Some
Yeah.
random dude built one guitar, whatever. How impressive is that, really?
Right.
Other than to you and your mom, I don't know. But so, and maybe it's a little bit of my business background, having worked in corporations for a lot of years, and in marketing and advertising, having to interface with all of that, as I understood that you're not really a company because you built a guitar.
Right.
At least I didn't feel that way. Like, what am I going to do? Put up a website and
For your one
have
guitar?
for my one guitar, like 6 different pictures with different backgrounds,
Yeah.
Photoshop it into different colors. Look, I've made 3. There's a red one and a blue one. So
Calling out those small business owners to do that.
that's fine. There's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with it. It's not
Yeah.
my thing. So I've sort of, and it's also for me a part of like honing the craft. Like that first guitar I built, it was all right. It was pretty good. It was enough to motivate me to build more.
Yeah.
But it was a first guitar. Let's be real about it. Um, so by guitar 4 or 5 or 6, I kind of had something going on. I was starting to get a feel for what I wanted to do, right? Not just,
Yeah.
oh, I built something, but starting to have a theme behind what is Grez Guitars going to be. So I probably didn't even put up a website until I'd been building guitars for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I had sold a few at that point, but I wasn't really trying hard to be a company and sell things.
Right. Because you're still doing the consultant thing full time at that point.
I was, yeah,
And so,
yeah. I mean, at that point, if you think about it, like the first year you build a guitar, maybe the second year you build 2 or 3. You're not, this is no great shakes.
yeah.
But then, I was designing various models, and sometimes things just come together. You have these random ideas. It's kind of like when things come into focus. I've done this, I built that. This makes sense. This is cool. That didn't work. And then it's sort of like, there's the Mendocino. It just, everything
Right.
came into focus with that. And I decided, okay, I'm going to stop building guitars randomly one off, and I'm going to have a model.
Right.
And I'm going to push this model. This is, to me, it felt like this is like worthy. It's unique, but still a little mainstream, not weird, and it has good manufacturability and an interesting look, and it sounds really cool, or so I think. It's light. So it just took a little while to like nail the thing that I was going to really push forward with. And once I did that, then I totally, hammered down and started going to trade shows and getting print ads, and then it quickly went from 12 a year to 20 to 40 to 60 to 80, and so
How many are you making a year now?
this year, I will probably ship 70 to 80 guitars this year, something like that.
Oh, wow.
So basically 1 or 2 a week is kind of the, on any given week, I should be shipping 1 or 2 guitars.
Okay. Are you still building them all entirely yourself? You got
I've got
apprentice,
help
staff?
now. 4 days a week I have help. Not quite
Okay.
full time, but
that's when I think you're a company, by the way. When you have to hire someone, that's when you're a company. When you're even if it's just, hey, I need you to come in and just take the orders, like, and turn the, so I can focus on the building. Let me not touch a computer. Like, let me, just do the building. That you're a company now because you're employing someone. That's when you really cross that line. To me, no shade on the solo small business owners.
Yeah, and I'm also very atypical. Like the normal trajectory is as somebody like me becomes more well known, and you can charge a little more, and eventually maybe you're charging 5, 8, 10, 12 grand for a guitar, and you build 10 a year, and the math says you can make a living on 10 guitars at 10 grand a piece, right?
Right.
That's a living. But all of my friends can't buy $10,000 guitars. So I'm trying to figure out how to make a living off of a $3,000 guitar, which
Yeah.
isn't cheap, but it isn't crazy expensive, right? A professional musician will spend that on a tool to do the job.
Yeah, and honestly, the hobbyist musician at this point, I was just having this discussion, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, how the entry point for guitars, price wise,
Yeah,
while right now there are better affordable guitars than ever before, I
absolutely.
find that the average buyer is a lot more willing now than even 3 4 years ago to drop 2 grand, 2.5 grand. It sort of feels like 2.5 grand has become the almost expected, like,
Right.
pro level instrument, even from a not small maker. Like, whenever I
Yeah.
see a small builder, I'm going to use the term boutique, which is a funky term anyway. That's FUNK, y'all. No explicit marker. I'm fine. So far. It, if I see a boutique maker selling their guitars for less than 3 grand, I immediately know they're still new at this, because
Right.
their guitars should be there should be a 3 at the front.
It's hard. I mean, I would love to sell these for 28, which is what I did for a while.
Yeah.
But I can't.
Yeah.
I can't quite make a go of it at that, with all things considered, with all the expenses, and especially being in California, property's not cheap here.
No. That overhead's, it's rough.
It's a lot. So I have to sell 60, 70, 80 guitars a year for it to add up to enough at the end of the day that that I keep going.
Yeah.
But that's not the normal outlook. Most boutique builders are thinking about how do I get to 6 grand for my guitar, 7, 8 grand
Right.
for my guitar. So in a way, I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm not boutique, or I'm just like boutique production. Some like a weird, like, I don't know what like, I don't know how many guitars a year, like Doug Cower makes, or Frank Brothers. I suspect
Yeah.
they're even a little bit bigger than I am. But still boutique. But it's that sort
Sure.
of like that weird middle ground where you're a boutique, but you're still a little bit of a production shop. We're not just making a guitar a month.
Yeah, sort of like how I think of a company like, I talk about a lot on the podcast, Novo. They've sort of grown, maybe almost on the edge of that not boutique anymore. Almost. I think they're right there. But it's like, Doug is definitely, I'd call, he's a boutique guitar maker, although his
Sure.
are sold in Guitar Center. I mean, congratulations, Doug. I mean, that's awesome. But it's also, at some point, you got to, like, what is the definition? What is your production level that, you can't, once you make 100 guitars a year, you're not boutique anymore. It's like,
I don't know what are the rules and who sets
what are
them?
the rules? Does everyone have to be, Matt Oram at Fidelity, making, I don't even know how many Matt makes, but there's not a whole lot of Fidelity guitars out there.
And I don't know that I would want to pin something like this, saying, oh, Novo's not boutique because they make more than 100. I mean, that's just crazy, right? They're great guitars, well crafted, good designs. Yeah. So it almost becomes a question of, well, what does boutique even mean?
What does it mean? That's why I always use air quotes around it, because it's that's right up there with transparent overdrive or amp like or violin like sustain. Stop it. Just stop it. But yeah, boutique. I prefer to just think of it as small builder, or because there's lots of guys out there who are doing, like you did at the beginning, building one-off guitars. They're just taking orders, like, what do you want, and I'll build it. And
that's totally great, but that's not a living.
No, that's
I'm not throwing any
branding.
shade, but
that's not branding.
That's not right. So it's just a different, like, if you build a couple of guitars a year as a hobby and make a little money,
right?
They could be excellent guitars, and that's awesome. So it's just, as a matter of fact, a lot of those folks are probably wise enough to say, I don't want to do this for a living. It's too much work.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep it as a hobby where it's fun.
Look at Alex Sorokin in, I can't remember what part of Canada he's in. He's the one who's built the guitars that Joey Landreth plays. And he is building guitars. He's got a great Instagram if you want to follow it. He takes beautiful pictures of the work he does. but he literally just tells you, I don't take orders. I don't, like, you can't contact me and ask me to build you something. It's like, I build guitars as a hobby. When they're built, if you want to buy them, here they are.
Yeah,
And that's just what he does.
that's super cool. I think I just come from a background of more of a production, and it just, that's what makes
Yeah.
sense to me, right? Is designing something that you can make efficiently, but making it efficient because it's designed to be made efficiently doesn't necessarily also mean that it's not amazing.
Right.
Like to me, that's like part of the art of good design is that it looks good, it's easy to make, it can be profitable, it sounds good, everything should be right, right? That's a win.
Yeah, and it's like I remember when it was a stigma. I think it still might be a little bit, but I think it's going away. Um, like when CNC first started getting introduced into the industry. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, for those of you that aren't aware, I'm going to drop some Mississippi knowledge on you. Um, PV was the first, as far as we're aware, PV was the first company in America to start using a CNC machine to start cutting their guitars.
Ooh, I didn't
If
know that.
somebody can drop an earlier company, please do. But that was how Hartley PV and the company decided to start changing the way they made guitars in America, because that was during an age when a lot of people were starting to outsource. They're more
Yep.
affordable, they're easier to make line overseas. So he got a CNC and was like, I'll just start cutting the bodies this way. And that's where a lot of those early PV guitars, the consistency came from, is that they were able to make
Mm-hmm.
these really consistent guitars. They also weighed a 4 million pounds. But that's a whole other thing.
That's more, but that goes back to design, right? Not a thorough and
Yes.
complete design, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They
So
they they weren't thinking about everything when they designed it.
yeah. But since then, you know, uh, guys, I'm gonna break a little mystique for you if you're not aware. Ernie Ball uses a CNC. Novo is on a CNC. Uh, Doug Cower cuts a lot on a CNC. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that's the way you can do it. You buy this really big, expensive machine so that it does a lot of the bulk of the work, so that you can do the more important things that your hands actually need to do
Yep.
to craft a quality guitar. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think some of the stigma's going away.
I've got a small CNC, and it doesn't build guitars, but it cuts out little parts for me.
Right.
And you know, before having the CNC, I would cut a lot of this on a pin router, which many of you may be familiar with.
Yeah.
And if you're not, let's just say it's a big, dangerous machine that makes a lot of noise, takes a lot of space, and so I don't know if I'm cutting out um, the shape of a body on the pin router. It's dirty, it's dangerous, it's loud, and there's no art to that because I've already made a template, and I'm just pushing the body along the template or the router along the template. There's no artisanal component to this. It's
Right.
just cutting something out. So you might as well have the CNC cut that perimeter for you because it's more accurate. It's safer. I don't have my hands anywhere near a bit. It's way cleaner. The fact that the dust collection is right at the bit of a CNC, the
Uh-huh.
shop is so much cleaner,
Yeah.
which makes a difference. And for me, because it's kind of low volume here, really, right? Like it can do it while I'm at lunch, so I don't even have to listen to it.
Oh yeah, you can walk
So
away.
I put a body blank on the thing. I hit go. I go to lunch. I come back. It's cut out. It's just so it's great.
So I'm really curious, and I've never asked this question before, but there's got to be, let's say you do that, like, every day you put one blank on, you go to lunch, that way you're not even listening to the machine.
Yep.
What's the failure rate on that? How often will you come back and there's an unusable body?
Oh gosh. Well, not so much anymore. There's
Okay.
a learning curve. Um, yeah, this especially having never owned or operated a CNC. Right. Luckily,
Right.
I had CAD experience from product design, so drawing something I could do and had done, but yeah, the CNC was a learning curve. Um, and well, first of all, the body blank on
Uh-huh.
average is $100 bill,
Okay.
right? I mean, a
Right.
giant chunk of redwood or a giant chunk of mahogany. I use off a lot of Honduran mahogany, one piece body blanks. Easily it's $100.
Right.
So every time you make a mistake, that's just $100 bill. Gone, gone. Or if you break the bit, right, that's $80, gone.
Ugh.
So you try not to break too many. And I don't know how many I've wasted. Not a horrible amount, but it
Yeah,
hurts. It hurts when
it
you
hurts
do.
every time.
It does. It really does. And one of the things is it's about uh, speed. So you can imagine the faster you push this router bit through the wood, the more torque is on that wood.
Right.
So how well you clamp that piece of wood down is really important. So your fixturing can only withstand a certain amount of pressure. So you got to slow the machine down until it's not exceeding the strength of your fixturing. And so you start out thinking, well, I'm going to go slow and be super accurate, and then you realize this machine's designed to go 4 times faster. Let's crank it up, right? And then parts go flying off the bed, and okay, so somewhere in between is a speed that gets this part cut at a reasonable amount of time, but also doesn't exceed my clamping force holding the part down. Let's say.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
Boring
I
stuff, but learning curves. Yeah.
see. I find it interesting. Like I'm that guy who's like, oh, I wish I had my own CNC. And then like all I would end up doing is like making the most ridiculous little things. Like I'd never do anything productive with it. So it's a good thing I don't have one because I would never do anything useful. I would I would I can't even say some of the stupid things I do because I don't want that out there forever on the internet. But like that's what I would do. Um, they fascinate me as a machine though, just CNC in general. I love all of the maker culture. I'm a librarian; it's part of the thing. I love 3D printers, and I love. I've always been trying to convince my wife to let me get a MIG welder
Mm.
because I really want to start doing metal sculpture.
Okay.
That's what I want to do. But she is thus far she has nixed the MIG welder. She just doesn't think she thinks I'll hurt myself. It's not a money thing. I think she just thinks I'll hurt myself. She's probably not wrong. Um, so, but I love the idea. But some of that stigma's going away. Finally, builders don't have to sit there and hand saw. Like if you want that, go find some of those folks on Etsy. They'll be happy to accommodate you and
Yeah.
pay the bill.
Yeah. The classic example is like fretboard slots.
Yeah,
Fret slots in your fretboard, excuse me.
yeah.
Right? So, you start out maybe with a ruler and you make marks and you measure where the frets are going to go, and you got a little box, what do you call it? Miter
I,
box, and you're
that's it.
cutting the fret slots. And then, you get the template with a special bit for your table saw. So the template registers in the right spots. But or the CNC just cuts them in the right darn place. I mean, the right
Right.
place. It, that's not bad, right? There's no soul sucked out of the guitar.
Right. This isn't a Ghostbusters trap that pulls in all of the mojo out of the
Yeah,
wood. It's
yeah,
literally making sure that your guitar is in tune when you play
yeah.
it.
But then there's plenty of folks who couldn't care less about CNC and are making everything by hand, and that's cool too,
Yeah.
right? It's just, to me, it's just whatever. It's a fancier router, and routers are acceptable.
Yeah.
Um,
I've
so
I've
yeah,
dropped a lot of the stigma around the more guitars I play, the more people I talk to, especially, and this is the big one, the more players, the more pro players, the more pro musicians, which is something I thought I wanted to do a long time ago with my life. Turns out I was way wrong. Um, it's the more of them I talk to, the less I start to care about certain things. One, the term handmade, like I, it's
I'm
such a
careful with
nebulous
that
term
term
anyway.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, like what was it? I'm gonna totally. I hope no one from DR Strings listens to this podcast, but DR Strings, their big thing used to be handmade strings. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you use a machine that you guide with your hand, and like, strings are one of those things. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a maker. I'm not gonna go down this rabbit hole, but how much of the guitar has to be made by hand before you can use the handmade moniker, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, do I need to completely carve the neck profile from a just square block of wood? Did I have to hand saw that block of wood?
Yeah.
It's
Did I
it's
cut the tree down?
right. Did I cut the tree? Oh, that's there are those folks out there too. But like things like I don't even know which you do, so this will tell you. Poly versus Nitro. I'm
Yeah.
like, it doesn't matter that much. I like them both. Um, I love Gibson guitars. I'm an unabashed Gibson guitar fan. Nitro guitars.
Yep.
You know what? I also love Doug Cower guitars, and those are poly. It's a
Yeah.
thin poly, but it's poly. You
And
know?
that's what I think matters is the thinness
Yes.
matters more than the material itself.
Yeah.
Right? You could put too much nitro on a guitar, I suppose,
Also,
right?
also there's the environmental and health impacts of nitro as well that need to be
Right.
taken into account. Um, if people are spraying nitro for your guitar, you're also paying for their health. You better be paying for their health insurance in the price of the guitar because that's a problem. Um, so I think it's cool. I love the guitars you're building. I like the fact that you've really honed in on. What if you got 5 models of the Mendocino, or is it 6 if I count the bass?
Yeah, with the new bass, let's see. There's Mendocino Junior, the baritone, the bass, and now I've got a couple of double cut versions. So
Yeah,
5-ish, 5 or yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, I remember. So I've been following you on Instagram for a while. Both my personal account and from the podcast. And when you announced the bass, it was right when I was sort of in the I need another bass. I have a P bass that I've had for years and I love it, but of course I always need more gear. That's a whole thing we're going to talk about in a second. That desire for more stuff. But I remember when I saw that one, I was like, oh, I might need to, but I've held
Yeah.
off because one, I don't get that many bass gigs, and I'm not recording a whole bunch right now. So I'm
Yep.
like, the one bass is fine, Philip. You barely play it. You don't need to spend that much money on what is undoubtedly an amazing bass, but that's a lot of money tied up into an instrument you're not going to play. Like
Yeah, you're going to
you're
use it
not
once a month, maybe.
right, exactly. So before we get started recording, we had this whole conversation talking about the stuff, and this has been something that's on my brain today. So, listeners, by the time you're listening to this, these have passed, so I will not be endangering your gear acquisition syndrome at all. Um, but actually, the 4th of July sale will still be going on. But the Sweetwater sales will have ended from Sweetwater's Gear Fest and whatnot. I have been so suckered in the last 2.5, 3 days by all of these gear sales. And I've had my finger over the purchase button more than once, just staring at it. Oh, that's really cool. I could totally stop. Because I've had this nagging thing recently where it's like, I have so much stuff. I have so much gear.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find you come across that a whole bunch? It's got to be different for someone who's making instruments. Is it different?
Well, it is from the standpoint of there's an awful lot of guitars here, but they don't count, right? Because they're demo guitars, and
Yeah,
that's not part of my collection. That's
that's
so
part of work.
that's part of work. Yeah. So I mean, I'm just if I look around the room here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, just looking around.
Yeah,
It's just within eye shot.
I was really glad when you crossed my number. I was really happy when you crossed that one because
But a bunch of these are old beater demo guitars that I lend out to people, and I've had them.
sure,
They're not my, although some of them are my collection per se, right? Things that I have just because I love them,
yeah,
even if I don't really play them that often. But you want to see?
sure, we'll take a
Super
peek.
quick. Bad podcasting,
Yeah,
I know, but
yeah,
we can
bad
turn
podcasting, good YouTubing.
yeah, we'll turn the camera. So there's a
Oh
Jeff
yeah,
Tweedy SG and a Gretsch Country Club and a whole bunch of Grez guitars down there, and just a bunch of, we were talking about gear, right? Cool, lots of
yeah.
amps and stuff. And all right, enough of that.
got some rad old amps. So I know, and actually, it's the first time I've mentioned. I know that you are a sponsor of the Truth About Vintage Amps podcast
Yes.
with Skip Simmons and Jason Verlinde over there at the Fretboard Journal. Got a lot of really cool old amps. That's been a thing that I've been sort of not getting into because it's such a dangerous rabbit hole for someone who has a hoarder mentality for gear like I do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those cool older amps they're really affordable. They're really easy to grab if you can stumble across them. But
It's getting harder, but
I saw you got a few cool older amps over there. What's your coolest amp? Not necessarily best sounding. What's your like raddest piece you've managed to collect?
that's an excellent question. I think it might be this little brown amp called Comco, COMCO. It's brown with little brown square with probably an 8-inch speaker, little white racing stripes on it. Got it at a garage sale for $25. And, it worked for a few years and then it blew up. And then a friend of mine who's an amp builder built a single-ended Class A Princeton into it, which I guess is maybe that's more like a Champ.
Yeah.
So he rebuilt
or a Harvard.
Maybe I think it's the Princeton.
I get all those mixed up.
I think he took the Princeton circuit, but a single output tube, so it's Class A Princeton.
Got it.
Whatever. Anyway, but it still is this super cool looking little amp, and it's plug it into a 1x12 extension cab, and it's just freaking awesome.
I love cool little rad things like that. Little you can't explain them. They're just a thing. There's a vibe to certain things, and you can't really argue with vibes sometimes. I picked up a Harmony Rebel H82, something like that. I can't remember. Actually, I'll grab it here in a second. Again, wonderful podcasting. It's okay, people. If you want to see what it looks like, you can go over to my Instagram, y'all. You can scroll the back a ways. You can see a picture of it. I posted it. I bought it from Fanny's House of Music in Nashville, and because I'd been wanting. I'm a blues guy. I've always been a blues guy. I'm from Mississippi. I'm from the Mississippi Delta specifically. It's in the blood. And I wanted something cool from that era, but the problem with guitars from that era, especially those department store guitars, they are either amazing or they are complete trash. And there's not really much of an in between. And because this one was from a seller I trusted, I knew it would be good. Let me see if I can reach it with my headphones.
Yeah. And while you're doing that, I'll just say that's a little bit of what was the inspiration behind the Mendocino, is to be a little bit like those department store guitars, but actually built well and playing properly.
And you'll see some of those in.
Oh yeah! Wow.
Look at
that's a lot of switches.
Yeah, it's actually. Let me see if I can do this without being able to see it. It's got sliders instead of knobs for volume and tone.
Okay.
And Fanny's replaced the stock bridge with a Bigsby. Again, I love Bigsby's, but the stock was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. But it's such a cool guitar. Such a rad, just vibey piece.
Yep.
Gold foils. It's got the original DeArmond gold foils on it.
Yeah, that's great sounding stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, that was me. That was the section of the podcast that was entirely for my own edification, talking about cool old stuff, because I love hearing about people's like raddest piece they've got, because there's always that. Everyone has that vibe piece.
So I'm a little bit more obsessed with amps than guitars.
Are you?
Because I have lots of guitars and I can make more, and so amp. So I guess because of that, I'm always looking at amps more than guitars. Cool old amps or even new boutique amps. There's so many super cool builders right now of amplifiers. You just can't afford to own all of the cool stuff you'd like to own, but there's so much good stuff out there right now.
Yeah, I've got a few that I love the amps, but at the same time, I have limited budget. And so I'm thinking about, like, literally today, I was thinking about, well, if I sold those amps, I could get these and try these out. You know what I mean? Because I can only have so much at one time. And when you're not gigging much anymore, I'd love to. I'm working on getting out there a bunch more. But, I'm playing like, I don't know, 15, 20 gigs a year now. Like at most, that's the most I'm doing. And I've got 3 different amps with 2x12 cabs, and I'm like, when are you using these, Philip? When are you playing out where you need this? So I love amps, and if I could, I'd have them all. I'm sorry, I have 4 amps with 2x12 cabs. I just remembered another one. But It's a thing. I would collect all of the amps. I will look at an amp before I'll look at a guitar or a
Yeah.
pedal. To be really honest, I'm much more likely to get into an amp. Um, and if it's got a tremolo or vibrato circuit in it, even better. And
Yeah, I do lean towards the stuff with that built in, even though a lot of what I have doesn't, just because that's how it goes. But
yeah, yeah,
I'm always happy when they do, if they're good at least.
yeah.
If they're
And
built in and they're good, that's
I
the
kind of
trick.
like it when they're not good and just find a way to make it work. It's like this only has like this one sound, but it's pretty cool if you can find a
Right.
place for it. Uh, I don't know. This has been on my brain all day today as I've been like staring at guitars and amps and pedals, and there has to come a place where we as guitar players and guitar collectors and just hoarders. I'm going to use the term. I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to say, um, burgeoning hoarders, um, where you have to be like, I don't, I don't have to have everything. Like I don't have to get by everything and have it in my house. That's why I like accumulating friends who have stuff so I can just borrow it and send it back. That's the real hoarding you need to do. Hoard gear friends.
Right.
Um,
Trusted people you can swap gear with. You need to know it's going to come back, but
yeah, absolutely. So circling back, because I wanted to circle back to the Folsom. I wanted to talk about it for a
hmm,
second because it's got a little bit of that quirky vibe to it too. I mean, if I were to just describe the specs, like if I didn't, show a picture or I didn't tell anybody exactly, I'd be like, oh, it's a two pickup double cut with, and you could give people a description, they're going to have an idea. It's not what you think. So you need to check it
right.
out. So where'd the inspiration for that model come from? Because I got to know.
Specifically, Paul Bigsby's guitars.
Okay, that
Yeah.
was one of the ones that was on my radar.
Right. So the Mendocino I feel like is built a little bit like a Bigsby guitar was built, and a
Okay,
little bit like the harmonies and other guitars which came later. Um, if you look at the guts, like how they're constructed, a little Bigsby-ish, but it doesn't look Bigsby at all. It's just the concept behind its design or construction. But the Folsom is kind of the opposite. It's solid body guitar. It's not
uh huh.
Bigsby like in construction, but the aesthetic is definitely a nod to what Paul Bigsby was building.
Yeah, it's got
Not
that.
not not a knockoff. I mean, guys like TK Smith and a few other people are building like really high end, amazing, super Bigsby inspired instruments. This is just more of a nod to Bigsby. It's not so on the nose.
Yeah, I think I especially see it, especially in that the cutaway and the horn. I see it there. I also see a little bit of like, uh, and that this is probably is also Bigsby design. A little bit of that Italian guitar influence, maybe. I love the crazy Italian guitar builds.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of those down here in Mississippi. They don't make their way. We get all the crazy old Japanese stuff and but
Yeah. So I have some old drawings of Bigsby guitars
really,
from a guy named R.C. Allen, who was a young guy who kind of hung out in Paul Bigsby's shop. Wasn't officially Paul's apprentice, but just apparently one of the few people that P.A. Bigsby would let hang out in his shop. And so R.C. Allen eventually became a guitar builder in his own right, and even owned a few Bigsby guitars. But anyway, so he had these sketches of Bigsby's guitars. And I ended up with a bunch of his stuff after he passed away. And in this pile of stuff was this drawing. So it's basically like a blueprint, like a hand drawing of a Bigsby guitar. I don't believe it was drawn by Paul Bigsby. I believe it was probably drawn by R.C. Allen. So it's not necessarily valuable,
sure.
but it's just a super cool piece, right? A drawing of a Bigsby guitar drawn by Bigsby's apprentice, maybe you can call him that. Anyway, so I'm staring at this thing.
Sure, we can call
I
them
had it
that. It's fine.
framed. It's on the wall. I stare at it all the time, and so the shape just uh, made its way.
Yeah,
I generally don't like to make copies of things and steal things. I kind of want to design my own thing,
yeah,
but this is just obscure enough that I felt like I could lift the shape, because I'm not really copying everything about a Bigsby. I'm,
Well,
I don't, yeah,
in guitar making, I've talked about this with past guests. It's so hard to be truly original, like
yep,
completely original. Not only because so much has been done, but because so much has been done and failed. Because let's be honest.
yeah,
If you can think of it, someone's probably tried it, and if you don't see it on a lot of guitars, there's a reason.
yes,
So it's a very difficult industry because guitar players are asses. Um, and there I said it. We're traditionalists. I'm a traditionalist.
yeah,
Even you modern folks who want to say, "Oh, you're a modern player," you are yourself. You have your traditions that you are latching onto that are part of your instrument making, and the way the instruments you like. I know what mine are. I just admit them. I know what my biases are. Um, and so we have these things that we like that have been sort of accepted as proper guitar
yep,
building and styles, and most of them were written in the 50s and 60s. And so it's hard to find your own thing and really make it your own, which is what I think the Mendocino especially does very well. It's very much its own thing. It doesn't look like anything out there, but it has aspects like you
yes. It's
see.
not like it came from aliens. It still
Right,
looks like the
exactly.
guitar, but yeah,
Yeah, it's not the new Tosin Abasi that Ernie Ball's making now.
right.
I'm not going to rip on it. I'm not going to rip on it. I'm not going to rip on it. I'm sure it plays incredible because Ernie Ball makes great guitars and Tosin is a great player, but it looks like a weapon from World of Warcraft. Um, so, yeah,
But
it,
something
it
you
does.
said is interesting to me, because as a product designer, um, this is the thought process that happens all the time. Is you have some stupid idea,
Mm-hmm.
you think, "Wow, I'm brilliant! I've just had this idea," and then you do a little research and you realize, A, it's already been done.
Yeah,
B, it's already been tried and it's not being done because it's a dumb idea. Or C, maybe you are brilliant and you should do it and you're the first one to think about it, but it's almost never C, right?
almost never.
So, yeah,
Almost
that's like,
never C. There's a lot of fixing problems that don't exist in C. Well, in things you
right.
think are C.
Yeah.
Um, I've had them. I've come up with things that I thought this is going to be the thing that makes me rich, and then I
Yep.
realized I was creating a problem so that I could solve it. It's like this isn't an
That's right.
issue.
And
Um,
even the things that solve problems, they're not even problems to everybody. It's kind of like stainless steel frets,
yeah,
right? To the devoted, it's solving a problem and it's the most amazing thing ever. But to other people, it's solving a problem that doesn't exist. Like, most people who buy a guitar and they play non-professionally will never wear the frets out on their guitar.
right. Yeah. The
So,
the
so it's
only
solving a problem that isn't existing for most people. Not that it doesn't exist for some people, but it is, yeah, it's not. Otherwise,
yeah,
all guitars now would be made with stainless steel frets.
it's exactly the only guitars I have that need fretwork, or I don't think I have anything that needs a refret, but I have a couple of pieces that are probably getting close to needing uh the next crown might be the last one kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, those are the guitars I was playing when I was playing 120, 130 nights a year.
Right.
Those are the guitars that I was playing then, and those are the ones that need the work. All the stuff I have now that since then, no, they're
Right.
never gonna need fretwork.
Right. Right. Yeah. When you have a number one and you're gigging hard,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
you might wear
exactly
out
it.
those frets.
Yeah, exactly. And
But
and depending on your string choices too, or the pressure you play with, or all those
yes,
other things too. There's a lot of people who just don't play with enough pressure to ever do that, to ever
that's
wear the
right.
frets out
Well,
like
I'm
that.
not entirely against stainless steel frets, but it's like an example of, it solves a problem, but it's only a problem for some people. It's for other people, it's not
Yes.
solving a problem. There is no problem.
Yeah, or what was the debate last year that raged for a little bit about someone made the claim that Gibson frets were in the wrong place and that's why they had tuning issues or why they were hard to intonate, and then like other people are like, I've never had a problem playing this guitar in tune. It's like, why is this a problem? Why is this
Yeah.
suddenly a problem now? Based on the numbers that you've run, saying
Yeah.
mathematically this is out of tune and you need to move the frets. It's
Yeah.
like,
Because they're never in tune. So
Yeah.
there's all these little tiny schemes to try to get them a little more in tune, but
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
down to going to the compensated nuts and all of that sort of stuff. And you go down the rabbit hole if you want, but
Yeah,
it's not a problem for most people.
it's not a problem for most people. It's just not. There was a what? Do you remember the string Butler? Have you seen
Oh,
those?
totally.
This, yeah,
Yeah. That solves a problem that in theory is a problem. In
yeah,
practice, Gibson guitars stay in tune, I guess.
yeah.
I mean, maybe they would stay in tune better with the string Butler with the straighter pull, I guess, but I don't know. Whatever. They work.
Yeah, they work exactly. But eh, guitar players are a weird lot, and I'm including myself in this. Once again, look at my bias against the new Tosin Abasi Ernie Ball guitar. I mean, that's my gut reaction based on my biases, and we're still playing guitars that were designed 60 years ago. You know, actually more than that now. The
Yep.
Strat came out. I mean, the Telly came out in what, 50, 51 in the broadcaster, no caster, you
Sure.
know.
A version
Yeah.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. A version of it came out in 72 years ago. And still today, you can buy that model,
Yeah.
essentially
That's
that
right.
guitar. And so we hold on to traditions. And so it's always hard to find your mark, to find your voice, your style, and be able to market it and make a move on it. And you've done a really good job with that, with especially with the Mendocino, because that's your model that I hear everyone talk about.
It
Everyone
is
I've
the
talked to
main
about Grez
thing. Yeah.
guitars, that's the one they talk about. I think that's why I gravitated to the Folsom. I'm like, yeah, but look at this. This is cool. You know, this is
Yeah.
rad. So do you have any plans for other models? You got some things cooking?
Well, I just released the bass version of
Yeah.
the Mendocino, and earlier this year I started making the double cut version. Two different versions of double cuts on the
Yeah.
Mendocino. So one of them is a Mendocino double cut that looks a little more tulipy,
Okay.
and then one of them is slightly bigger and more Gibson-y. Not by any means 335,
Gotcha.
but just a touch bigger and a touch more traditional in the cutaway shape. Um,
Okay.
and So for the moment, it's just focusing on making all of this stuff and keeping up with production. And
Yeah.
um, there's always a list of like things I want to do. Like I would love to build a Mendocino with an arched top, so it'd be fully hollow.
Oh, that would be so rad. Oh my
Right, so it'd
gosh,
be
please do
a
that.
super miniature sort of arch top because the back wouldn't be arched. But
Yeah.
I would love to build one of those. I don't know if that's worthy of a model or just something I'll build someday for the fun of it. I would love to build a Mendocino with a metal top. So the same frame, but instead of the redwood top, a metal top. So it wouldn't be a resonator, but it would
Right.
have some clanginess to it.
Yeah.
Um, all sorts of little things I would like to do, but there's, I don't know, not enough hours in the day as it is at this point.
Not at
So
all. I'm still convinced some people have 28 hours in their day, and I want to know how they pulled that off. But please
yeah,
do the arch top. That sounds so rad.
yeah,
That sounds so awesome. But I am an arch top. I love arch top guitars. So, um, my dream guitar for a long time was a 175, and I've
mm,
still yet to realize that dream, which doesn't make any sense. I have a lot of guitars. I
yeah.
could easily have gotten a 175 by now, but
Yeah.
uh,
And I
I
still
think
make arch tops and acoustic guitars and all these other things. It's just not the main thing, like you're saying.
okay,
It's mostly Mendocinos, followed by Folsoms, followed by one-off custom commissioned steel string flat top acoustics, or 17-inch arch tops. Or so I still do some of that, um, but those are smaller numbers. Like I'm only building 5 or 6 custom things a year, like super custom, like
I gotcha.
acoustic guitars. And
Yeah, like do you? So when you're building those, are those just purely for your own interests or your own trying to learn a technique, or do you actually take an order every now and again for a crazy custom build?
Well, I guess what it is, it's more of a legacy thing.
Okay.
So before I got to the Mendocino, I started out building acoustic guitars,
Oh wow.
and then sort of semi hollow bodies, and then I ended up building arch tops. And so I've never never basically taken all those old models and gotten rid of them and said all we do are Mendocinos and Folsoms. So
Gotcha.
mainly we do Mendocinos and Folsoms. But if you scroll through the website, there's like a little page of custom stuff. And there's 15-inch, 16, 17, 18-inch archtops of all sorts that I can make. And so I just take orders for those sometimes, because if you've got like a vintage ES350 that you're touring with, it's a valuable instrument and it's slowly falling apart from the abuse of the road.
Yeah.
And so you might come to somebody like me and say, hey, can you build me something very much like this old ES350? But while we're at it, let me customize it. I want these inlays and I want the body to be whatever. And then I can leave my vintage one at home for recording and I'll take yours out on the road.
Yeah.
And so those are the sort of things I do from time to time. Although admittedly, those are becoming harder and harder to do because the mentality is just different. Like the brain space shift from making Mendocinos and Folsoms to stopping and, okay, we're going to laminate some archtop plates now. It's just,
totally different
it
style
messes
of
with
building.
the workflow a little bit.
Yeah. And I have a hard time just transitioning from lunch to after lunch work. So I can't imagine completely shifting the style of building something to, because it's a completely different style.
Yeah.
It's a
but
totally
I enjoy
different
building acoustic guitars and archtops and but they're too labor intensive. It would be too hard to make a living building those unless you took that route we talked about where you charge a lot for them, which I don't want.
Charge a lot for them and hire more help.
Right.
Yeah.
So I keep them as like random custom-y things.
That's very cool. I'm going to have to take a peek at those because I had not looked at those yet to see what other things were lurking around your website while I was looking at the models you offer. Well, actually, we're rounding out pretty close to the hour here, and so we're gonna start to wrap this episode up, and we're gonna go over to the Patreon episode. Listeners, you heard at the top of the show, Patreon my supporters are how this show can keep happening. If you're enjoying the show, please go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast. You can support the show for as little as I think $3 a month or as much as like $50 a month. And I think at $50, I give lessons at that point. You get to steal some of my time. That's guitar, keys, bass. I'll teach you music theory. If you want to learn music theory, God bless you. Yeah, I will go down that rabbit hole. But as I started last episode, I'm going to start thanking my Patreon supporters by name at the end of my episodes. So today's special thanks, and I have a special tier as well for a Patreon supporter. So thank you, Scott Hamilton. Thank you, Giacomo Ride. Thank you, Andy Koning. Thank you, Jim Burns, Tom Kelly, Heath Batt, Ben. I'm just going to skip that name for a second. Rick Calhoun of Honey Picks, David Ishizaka of the Timber Owls, Jeffrey Walks, and Kyle Harris. And a special thank you to Ben Fair, who has upped his contribution to $10 a month. I'm going to start calling him our executive producer now because I need a new perk. It's my first $10 supporter, so I need to figure out what to do that's special now. Thanks, Ben. No, really, thank you, Ben. So thank you, listeners. Hope you have a great time. Hope you had a great time listening. Hope you'll have a great time hopping over to Patreon and listening to the Patreon episode. But even if you don't, until next time, Barry, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate everyone listening, and everybody be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And listening to me ramble about my Patreon supporters. So y'all, in the meantime, you know the drill. Be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and try to make some noise.